Life Coach with your hosts, Brian Hogan and Morgan Barbrett. We are going to continue our conversation about emotions today by talking about, spoiler alert, not an emotion, hope.
Yeah. Yep. As Brian and I went through and kind of researched, we realized that there are multiple perspectives on whether hope is an emotion. There's obviously hope as a concept, which is not an emotion. And then there's like the feeling of hopefulness, which you could argue is still not technically like one of the main emotions, but it's still an energetic experience that we can have in our bodies. So we'll kind of get down to talk about all the nuance of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to remember that when we split hairs here, like as we talk about it now, like, okay, hope is more of an affect, more of a state of being than it is an emotion, right? But then there's hopefulness, there's hopelessness, which are clearly felt senses in the body. And in the end, it doesn't matter if you leave this discussion and decide to call hope an emotion or an affect or a state of being. What would be most useful is if you understand how hope operates in your system better, know
Mm-hmm.
how to nurture it properly, and how to avoid sort of the hope hangover that can come if the thing you were hoping for does not actually materialize.
Yeah, yeah. So, Brian, did you want to start with your definition?
Oh, actually, yeah, sure, I do. The definition is a little lower down in my notes. So, as I was looking up the definition, I actually got fascinated by like the idea between hope and yearning because
Mm,
there was this polarized thing in all of the research about like hope is good, no, hope is bad, and like hope promotes resilience, hope promotes disappointment and self delusion and wishful thinking. So I was like, oh my god, which one, right? And so I looked up both hope and yearning to see if that would help me clarify it, and it did actually. And hope was defined as the belief or expectation that something wished for can or will happen. So that's interesting to me because it's not even that it will happen, just the belief that it could happen also
mhm.
is cause for hope, right? So you're not even necessarily expecting that you'll get it. You're just expecting that the possibility of continuing to try for it is open to you. That's
Yeah.
that already is groundbreaking to me. So like the fact that I can continue pursuing my career in film is hopeful, whether or not I actually ever win an Oscar, for example.
Mhm.
And
Right.
then there's the definition of yearning, which was a wistful or melancholy longing. So right there in those definitions, you can see baked into the way hope is being defined is this idea of positive expectation, of like
Mhm.
anticipation, the way it feels on Christmas morning, or and with yearning, baked into the definition is sadness, is a feeling of a thing being missing, a missing piece,
Wanting
incom-
something.
yeah, incompleteness in a sense, right?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, and there's also I don't know exactly how this works with definitions, but there's also an archaic definition that says a feeling of trust. And I
Hmm.
really like that one. Because well, and we'll talk about attachment a little bit more later, but the feeling of trust to me says that there is a lack of attachment. You may still have like a hopeful expectation or still be like believing that something positive is possible, but trusting in it fully, not necessarily being attached to it happening, but trusting that it is possible.
Yeah, you know what that makes me think of too? I love that archaic definition. I oftentimes think these like the definitions that come from the roots are really eye-opening sometimes. And
Yeah.
this idea that hope, how did you define it? Hope is the feeling of trust.
Feeling of trust. Yeah.
Yeah, it made me think as you were talking that it's like, okay, I can hope for the thing I'm hoping for, but as I'm hoping, I'm filled up with the feeling of trust, not necessarily even in the thing materializing, but like I'm trusting in the fact that it's okay to hope. Like I'm trusting in life to support me regardless of whether the thing materializes. Like that's kind of what I took from it. So it's like thinking of hope as so polarizing the way we've been describing it. It's like this way. It's like if you're hoping with that feeling of trust in life, then you're hoping in a way that has actually detached you from the outcome and that has allowed you to navigate if you get a yes or a no from the universe, so to speak, right? Where because you're walking through your process of hoping every moment saying I trust, I trust, I trust.
Hmm.
It's like you're trusting the moment, you're not trusting
Yeah.
the promise, so to speak, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, you're not attached to the outcome actually materializing, like you said.
Yeah, I love that definition. Wow, it's the feeling of trust. I mean, who doesn't want to walk through life feeling moment to moment like you can trust the next step, like you can
That
trust
it's
what's
going to be
going
okay.
on. Yeah, that it's going to be
Yeah.
okay. Even if
Mhm.
physical circumstances are problematic for you in that moment.
Mhm.
Because we're talking about an internal world, and that's not to say the internal world doesn't get affected by the external world. They do. They affect each other back and forth like whiplash, right? But
Mm.
we mostly walk through life in the human state, especially in this culture, just being batted around by the external world and doing our level best to kind of stay upright as we go. And the this conversation about emotions, for me, one of the main reasons why it's so valuable and why, I mean, I'm learning so much as we talk about it, is because it will help me to be less wobbly in my internal world despite the external world. So it's not to say the external world
Mhm.
won't have its effects on me still, but it's like the question of like whether does the external world like slam me into the wall or does it just bump me,
Yeah.
right? And like that's dependent on my
Yeah.
emotional intelligence also.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about what hope feels like when you have it, because there's a lot of different ways it can feel, but also what it feels like when you're lacking it. Because I feel like it's almost more noticeable when it's absent.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So I mean, when it's absent, it's like a despair. It feels
Yeah.
like a despair. Like this is where in the research for me it was so interesting when there was the negative, all the stuff about how hope is problematic. It was like, okay, yeah, so there's these things that could happen as a result of hoping too much that might cause you some suffering. But on the flip side, the negatives of not having any hope at all they were all catastrophic. Like
They're
they're all
way worse.
yeah, way worse. Like it's like, okay, so if you have no hope, the planet explodes. If you have too much hope, I don't know, you may have a stubbed toe, right? You know, like that's
Yeah.
kind of the thing. So it's like I'd rather have
Yeah.
too much hope and learn to navigate disappointment than be hopeless.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
did not answer your question though. So to
No.
the feelings, yeah.
No, no, but I think that's, metaphorically, like, right on the nose in terms of how it feels. Because like, if you have no hope and you have no belief that some positive outcome is possible, I think not only is it emotionally catastrophic, but it's, like, physically
Hmm.
catastrophic because if I don't believe that something is possible, I will not try for it. I
Mm-hmm.
will never take any actions that allow me to have a more positive outcome in my life because I don't think it's possible in the first place. So like think of any goal, any thing that a person could hope for. For example, like if someone is single and they're hoping to find a partner, if they don't believe it's possible, they're never going to get on a dating app. They're never going to go to like some event that helps them meet people. They're not going to go to like friends parties, or they're not even going to message somebody when their friend says, "Hey, I have this friend who's single who might want to talk to you." Like if you have no hope that it's possible, you are not going to do anything that makes it possible for you. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's what makes it like physically catastrophic. And that applies to any, hope or goal that you might have. But
So
then
hopelessness is
emotionally,
like
yeah.
freezing. It's a
Yes.
paralysis thing that happens.
Yeah, lack of yeah, hopelessness is freezing, hopelessness is yeah, like
I'm
as
also
if
hearing,
everything's put on pause.
sorry, yeah. I'm also hearing that hope is motivating, like the way you're describing
Yes.
it. Like hope is the sort of the wellspring of energetic forward motion.
Yeah. Yeah, if I have belief that something is possible, then I have the opportunity to get excited about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't.
So yeah, so those are sort of the results, right? You were about to say more about the
Yeah.
feeling sense of it.
Yeah. Well, so if you have no hope, then in your body, you're going to feel like if you have no hope, then there's all sorts of thoughts that come along with that, which then create just absolutely awful emotions. Like if I have no hope that I can ever find a partner, then I might start thinking things like, well, I have a partner. I'm running with the example that I have that I laid out earlier. If somebody if their goal or their thing that they would have otherwise been hopeful for is finding, somebody to love, and they have no hope of that, then that's going to lead to all sorts of other thoughts, such as like, I'm not good enough to have a partner. I'm not lovable. I'm not blah, blah, blah. And then this leads to this feeling of trapped where I don't see a way out of my circumstances and I don't see a way for me to have what I want. And that will lead to like clinical depression
Mm-hmm.
or can. It won't always. It depends on your other coping mechanisms. But like if you do not have hope, you can find yourself in some of the worst mental emotional states imaginable. You're going to feel all sorts of shame. You're going to feel all sorts of like smallness. Your ego's going to hurt like a bitch. Like it's going to suck.
Yeah. This makes me wonder then, like, and I don't have the answer for this. So if you have some thoughts, I would love them.
Yeah.
But as we're talking, I'm really like, I'm feeling this thing in me of like, well, if I
Yeah.
am hopeless, then what do I do to nurture hope in a way that it's not going to
Mm-hmm.
dash me even harder against the rocks because I'm not equipped to handle disappointment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing that comes to mind is like, and this is not going to make sense when I say it, is neutrality. When you're feeling hopelessness, you're kind of thinking that absolutely nothing is possible for you and that you're trapped and that you can't do anything, and that you have no power to change your situation. So anything that is more neutral than that, like I'm safe in this moment, or I have the ability to create friendships. I know that I have created friendships in the past, and so I like recognize that this is possible for me, finding the things that have already happened in your life and therefore they are possible, and therefore say something about what else may be possible in your life. You don't have to say, oh, like I'm going to find like my, you know, perfect soulmate, or if we apply to some other goal, that I'm going to be able to make $1 million in, a month. But I also recognize that there are things that I have done in my life that demonstrate some amount of capability.
Mm-hmm.
And if I've done it before, I can do it now.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
kind
can
of,
build on that.
yeah, like trying to review your past evidence of that's
Yeah.
competing with your current sense of hopelessness, essentially.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I get what you mean by neutrality too, because like what that brings to mind for me is that whole idea of like positive affirmations and how like you're if you're feeling some kind of way and you start saying positive affirmations, the moment you go too positive where all of your system doesn't believe you, they stop having the force of power behind them because they don't feel true anymore to your system. And so
Yeah.
now you're just lying to yourself as opposed to saying a positive affirmation, because that's how your system is receiving it. Whether the statement is true or not in life doesn't matter. It's like if you don't
Yeah.
believe it, you're having the experience of lying to yourself. And what you're describing with this, like, I feel hopeless, nothing good can ever happen for me. You can't start saying, yeah, good things can happen for me if it doesn't feel true. But you might be able to say, I suppose it's possible that not everything that happens is going to be bad. Right? It's just like
Mm-hmm.
just move one step over and keep moving that step over until that thought, even if it's negative by culture's definition, if it's more hopeful than where you were, you're making progress, and you just go as slow as you need to, where every new thought closer feels true. And as soon as it stops feeling
Mm-hmm.
true, that's where you stop and say, I have work to do. I have some part
Yeah.
that needs tending to because I can't get on board with this yet. And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and also some of the neutrality is like getting like just like leaning into like fact versus fiction, which is one of the tools that Martha Beck uses, is like, is this true? Is this a fact? Is the thought that I'm having that is like making me feel hopeless, you find one of the many that are pouring over you and you pick it out and you say like, is this 100% true? Do I really believe that this is 100% true? Because my body is taking this thought and telling me that it's true. And then I feel all these negative emotions and shame around it. But is it actually? And
Mhm.
challenging that. Because if you never challenge your hopelessness, it is going to build on itself. But if you do challenge it, then you're going to have moments where you're like, oh, like, okay, maybe it's not that bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. And what strikes me as I'm hearing this is like just how much energy it takes to change cognitive distortions in
Oh
the
my gosh.
body,
Yeah.
and how little energy one has when they're feeling hopeless. And
Oh, yeah.
that's tough, right? And so it just brought to mind this another whole aspect of that addressing this that I wanted to bring up, which is movement too. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
really in a place of feeling hopeless, it might be that any thought slightly more hopeful than the one you have doesn't feel
Mm-hmm.
true. That's possible. You know what I mean? That
Yeah,
even one step
that's
over
true.
feels like a lie. In that case, it's really important and essential if you can to try to get some movement or some sunshine. Like the thing is, these things that we say them over and over, wellness professionals say them over and over, and they start to sound like a boring cliche. But that's the reason they're said so much, is because there's so much power in it. Like there is so much power in getting outside in nature, in the fresh air. Like even if it's for 5 minutes in the winter and that's all you can do because it's 0 degree, like there's so much power in it. And if
Yeah.
changing your thoughts feels like a daunting mountain, then maybe you can just go sit on your back porch for a few minutes. Like even that's something
Yeah.
jockey loose, because hopelessness is characterized by this frozen thing, right? So, and everything is a reflection of everything else. So if you're frozen in your mind, move your body and your mind may unfreeze. If you're frozen in your body, move your mind and your body may unfreeze. So it's like
Mm.
tackle it from every which way, because the mind and the body are the same thing anyway. Like it's only our language that creates this slicing it up into components. We're just a creature, one thing, with a mind body mechanism. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And to add just a little to the argument for movement as a way to help stoke hope is that for most of human history, we've been very physical beings. And being in like modern day times, post, industrial revolution and now like technological like revolution, we kind of, my dad would say, modern living has robbed us of our physicality. Like you can exist as a human being and not move other than to stand up, go to your computer, sit there all day, make yourself a bowl of food, and then get back to bed. And that's what a lot of people's lives look like. And it's not their fault. That is like just kind of a normal human existence now. But that's not, nobody, like we didn't get to this point like surviving on the planet doing that. We just created a life that is possible that way recently. And so I think that this like being robbed of physicality is part of like the rise of like mental illness in like
Mm,
recent decades, is like people are moving less and less and getting less and less sunlight and getting less and less nutrients, and all of these things contribute to how clear our minds and our emotions feel.
yeah. It's so true. I'm glad you put such a fine point on it, because it's like your dad said, we basically just sit around. Like
Mhm.
that's it. We're a species that just sits around. And that's not a
Nobody's
judgment.
fault. Yeah.
It's how it is now. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
it sounds judgmental because culture has a whole thing about like don't just sit around, but like I don't mean it judgmentally. Like this is
Yeah.
that's one of the facts of our culture now, is that we mostly just sit around. Like
Yeah.
that's
That's just how it is. Yeah, we have normalized sitting at a desk for however many hours a day, and then you don't really have time for other things. But and also, uh, eh, there's a series on Netflix. Um, I think it's called How to Live to 100. And so there's like five what's called blue zones of like the 5 places on the planet where the highest percentage of people live to be centenarians, meaning you live to 100 or more. And one of the common threads amongst all of those places in the world, that these people aren't like working out, they just have physicality being a part of their life. All these people have gardens. They're like growing their food and like being outside, and they hang their laundry out on clotheslines, and just move in, and a lot of times they don't have like couches, like they sit on the floor or have like little mats, and so they're constantly getting up and sitting down and getting up and sitting down from the floor, and movement is just a part of their life. And also like some other things like community and better nutrition and other things, but movement is still a huge piece. And when you ask these people who are living to 100, they would say that this is like an important part of being able to live this long. And I don't know about you, but I don't really know anyone in my vicinity that lives like that.
Yeah, no, I know. I feel you. You're so right. We're very sedentary. The picture you're describing, it's like I want that, except I want a couch. Like I want everything. I want everything
Yeah.
you've described, the community, the belonging. I don't even need a washer and dryer. Like, but I want a couch.
I also want a couch. Oh, I love it.
So
yeah, but anyhow, yeah, hope for a couch. But yeah, anyhow, let's get back to hope. I guess it all is related to hope. But in terms of if you're in hopelessness, movement is like the best place you can turn. You don't have to even look at your thoughts. That can come later. Just get your body moving, and that will help.
It will help, because that getting your body moving can actually help to change your thoughts without your effort. That's why nature is so powerful. It just changes your perspective. Like suddenly our place in the scheme of things becomes clearer. Oh, I'm this size in a forest is a lot different than like I control the room I'm in, right? Like we feel so important in our own environment because like we've put everything that way. So it's like I control reality and earth, like it's subconscious, right? When you get out in nature, you're like I control nothing, and there's a serenity that comes with that perspective, and that perspective doesn't just happen to you. It comes as you explore your real place in the size and scheme of things on this giant planet, which means being out in nature, in some form. I was thinking about hope, and I wanted to like think of an example of where hope can be both friend and foe. If like I was thinking about in my life, like what have I hoped for, where like hope was both good and bad, or could have been good or bad. And I was thinking about my memoir, right? So I have a memoir that I want to get published, and I wrote it in 2017, and like stung, yeah. And I have hope for it, so I keep submitting it. I keep querying agents, right? But I get rejections all the time, and I get disappointed all the time.
And you're a great writer.
Yeah, thank you. And even the rejections I get, a lot of time I just don't hear back. But the rejections I do get, the agents will say things like, "We loved your writing, we loved your pages, like it really pulled me in." But and then they'll tell me like the reason why it's a no, and it has to do with like my platform, because it's a nonfiction book, and so like you can't, in nonfiction writing, like the world of agents, they really want you to have your own platform to get it out there, or else you have to be like Barack Obama or Candice Bergen or something, right? Like that. So like I keep getting these rejections, but because they're telling me that they like my writing, like it's fueling my hope, right? So it's like it keeps fueling my hope, and then I feel the disappointment more deeply the next time, because I'm like, but the writing was good. You even said like you're this close to saying yes to me. So it's this hope creates a feeling of disappointment, but it's also the hope that mobilizes me to send the next query and the next and the next, and like I'll continue to do that. And so it's easy to hold out hope, but it's easier to do that when you believe in the thing and you believe in yourself and you can detach from the outcome. So the reason I know that viscerally in my felt experience is because I used to want this book published ASAP. I wrote it in 2017, and I was like, it'll be published by 2018. Of course, that was not true. Like I was super disappointed. And then I was like, it'll be published by 2019. Like, and I kept doing that, right? And that was this urgency, this yearning thing along with it. So the hope would disappoint me, smash me down into despair. And, and eventually, somewhere in the time of the pandemic or so, I got to researching the literary world more and kind of getting a little more agency over it, and decided to take the ticking clock off this goal. And so now I'm able to nurture the hope to fill me with excitement, because the excitement is intended to go with hope. But when we hope with attachment, or when the hope turns into yearning, it doesn't feel exciting. It feels anxiety inducing, right? So it's like because anxiety and excitement are like two sides of this coin, right? And so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's really meant to fill me with excitement, but hope doesn't do it correctly if I'm all attached and bound up in the hope, right? So now
Yeah.
I'll still send queries. I still do that, and I'm still making edits to my book now. But actually, that whole process feels less daunting and more enjoyable. And sometimes the actual process of like sending the letters to agents is not enjoyable because that's just
Mm-mm.
logistical, but it is suddenly more peaceful for me to do it and less fraught. It's like I used to sit down to send queries and I would have to like armor myself, and all my little inner children who are afraid of rejection would have to be like, just send it, you know? And now
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, we're just going to send them. We're just going to send them. And like everybody's more peaceful about it
Yeah.
because they're the hope is there, but it's not tied to our success or identity as a person. Like you were saying before, if I would get a rejection earlier, it would be, oh, this means I'm a bad writer and the world doesn't want to hear what I have to say. That's
Yeah. Which is not
personalized
true.
disappointment. Yeah, it's like taking it personally, right? And all it just means is like I wasn't a good fit for that agent at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great example of a neutral way of looking at it. I wasn't a great fit for that agent at that time, as opposed to I suck.
Exactly, because the first one is the fact. That's all I can know for sure because that's what they told
Yeah.
me. The second one is meaning. I add, I suck.
Yeah.
That's additional
Yes.
meaning. Yeah. That so there's that
Yeah.
narrative, that inside narrative that comes again. So hope is
Mhm.
really, really tricky.
Yes, it is. It is. Man, I sorry, I have so many thoughts after everything that you just shared. Um, I feel like also sometimes like when we're initially feeling hopeful in like a very like almost like it's kind of like an anxious energy. Sometimes you feel a lot of hope with the attachment to the outcome happening quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of an anxious feeling. And I felt that before, where like you have an expectation that, like, not only do I believe this thing is possible, but I believe I can do it right now, immediately. And
Yes.
part of that expectation comes from the fact that pretty much every successful person that achieves these things that like are high end, like exciting, fantastic goals are people who have been working towards those for a very long time, sometimes their entire lives. And we sometimes hear stories about like their beginnings, but for the most part you just see them having arrived, just like being where they are. Like Oprah, like, people don't realize how much crap that woman has been through.
Yeah. I just read something recently about how in the early 80s she was like fired from her first news magazine job.
Yeah. She
So
was fired from her first news magazine job. She had an, like, early, pregnancy, um, and there were so many failures in her path. Not that having an early pregnancy is necessarily a failure, but just, things that, like, didn't go the way that she wanted them to go.
yeah, setbacks we can say.
Setbacks, yeah. Um, and she still is the woman that she is today. But that did not happen overnight. That did not happen in a couple years. That happened in decades.
Yeah, it's important what you're talking about here too, because this goes right to the whole like the artificial way in which social media makes things seem like they're instantaneous too. Like we, in this paradigm right now, like our culture is already very instant gratification focused. And now we can
Mhm.
see everybody in the world of social media, and all we ever see is their arrival and beyond. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it almost gives us this false idea that hope should somehow lead to instantaneous success, which may be
Yeah.
an unconscious thing we hold, but it's definitely false and could lead us to
Yeah.
suffering if we are holding something like that.
Yeah. Well, it makes it harder to succeed because then, and this is my experience, is if you expect something to happen fast, then as soon as you realize it's not happening fast, then you're like, "Oh my god, what if it's not actually possible?" Oh
Hmm.
my god, like, what have I done wrong? Is it that I'm not actually capable of this thing because it didn't happen fast? Is it that, your mind starts making all this meaning because it thought it was going to happen fast, and now that it's not happening fast and it's not matching the expectation or the picture that you were attached to, that's where the discouragement comes in. But if
Mhm.
I can be unattached to it happening in any particular timeline, and I can be just focused on making one small modification like you're doing with your book, you're just like gradually editing it, you're gradually working on building an audience, you're gradually working on all of the factors that will eventually amount to that success, and you're not like making it have to happen in 1 month
Anymore.
yeah. Right anymore. Well, and same, with some of my goals that I wanted to happen really quickly. It becomes apparent, and I think for you and I both, who are very committed to some of the things that we want to have happen in our lives, like we have to, or we get to a point where we realize we have to release the reins, and we have to be okay with it not looking any particular way if we want it to work,
The
because it will
experience.
not work. Yeah, it will not work if I am attached to it looking one particular way. And if I let that disappointment of it not matching my exact expectation become the dominant experience of working towards that goal.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I think when I keep saying hope is so tricky, that's what I'm talking about actually, is that
Yeah.
hope hope it's like hope is a cliff, and one false move and you're in disappointment ocean. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's why it's tricky. Like you just got to walk the tight wire of hope, and that
Yeah.
means being unattached all the time from the outcome so you don't slip off into disappointment valley or whatever. But
Yeah.
so that brings me to, I wanted to share an exercise that was actually about how to navigate disappointment, because that's the thing
Okay.
that um it's super simple, and it comes from an article I read in Psychology Today. So like disappointment has these three qualities to it that make it worse. One is globalization, one is personalization, and one
Hmm.
is deciding it's bad. That feeling
Okay.
disappointment is bad. So this is a three-step process. It's like, okay, I'm feeling disappointment. So it's all about noticing, self-awareness. So the at the root of this exercise is the root of all the other exercises. You just got to slow down, allow yourself to go inward so you can notice your internal landscape. Once you're there
Hmm.
and you're able to notice your internal landscape while totally feeling disappointed, you want to go into the thoughts or feelings that are making you feel disappointed. And step one is change the thought that's globalized. So a globalized thought might be, oh, if it didn't happen for me this time, it will never happen for me ever. So you've made it
Yeah.
global, right? So
Yeah.
noticing that it's global and saying, okay, it didn't happen for me this time, and that's the only fact I know.
Yeah.
That's step one. Step two is to notice where your thinking is making it personal, which would be like, if it didn't happen for me, that means I'm bad, or that means I'm not talented, or that means XYZ about me. That's
Hmm.
personalizing it. So don't globalize
Yeah.
it, don't personalize it. And if you have
Hmm.
personalized it, just separate it out. It didn't happen for me this time. It doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
That's and then step three is really trying to allow the experience of disappointment to be what it is without labeling it as bad. Like, oh, it sucks to feel disappointment. Sure, it does. It's a yucky feeling, right? But like, it's not bad that you're feeling that way. So we can, instead of saying it's bad that I feel disappointed or it's sucky to feel disappointed, practice something like, I didn't choose this, but let's see what comes of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's an openness to it.
Yeah, like an openness, just sort of, because honestly, that last one, as I read it back now, it really goes along with your archaic definition of hope. I didn't choose
Hmm.
this, but let's see what comes of it because I'm walking with the
Yeah.
spirit of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. That resonates. Oh, and also another way to think about the global piece is anytime that you're thinking in absolutes,
Mm,
always, never, everyone.
yeah,
Anything that is an absolute is a global.
yeah, yeah. Anything and everything that is an absolute
Mhm.
is
Yep.
a global, except this one. This one's perfectly fine to be an absolute. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well,
Well, this
thank you
was
for that
really invigorating.
exercise.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Thank you for this discussion. Any final thoughts about hope before we close out for today?
Um, just that it's worth having.
Yeah, it's worth having. So, J.R.R. Tolkien's quote from The Lord of the Rings is, "Where there's life, there's hope," because it's so intrinsic to mankind and human nature. So as we head into this crazy time of life, everybody, with all kinds of crazy things going on in the globe, if you can, if it feels true, don't let go of hope. Mm-hmm. Until next week, be hot, be messy, and be blessed. Much love, everybody. Bye.